Today's daf is daf ayin ches. We are going to begin. Afilu hu ima bamita. The Mishnah said that if he throws a get to his wife while she is in his house, she's not divorced. And the Mishnah says, Afilu hi ima bamita, even if the get is with her in the bed, he throws it onto the bed on which she's sitting or laying. And what Rabbi says, Leishanu ela bamita shaloi. This din in the Mishnah is only if he throws it with her in his bed. If he throws the get to her and it's with her in her bed, even if it's in his rishus, Allah is migaydesh. But if it's in her bed, migaydesh, she is divorced. And if the get is in her bed, she is divorced. But we know there's a whole machlekes and Kelly the shalikeach b'rishus meicheru. But the bed, l'chera, has the same din as a keli that are in the domain of the seller. Since the bed that belongs to her is in the house of the husband, shamas midah, so let us solve the machlekas. Let us derive from here that keli shalikeach b'rishus meicher, that even if the keli of a buyer are in the domain of the seller, the buyer acquires anything that is deposited into his keli. And as we know, like Rashi says, this is a machlekes. So the Gemara says, no, it's not necessary to say the Gavei Asar, where the bed is 10 Tefachim high, and the bed is considered its own rishus. So the Gemara says, Vayikum Malkim Kari, but you have the place of the legs. Legs are standing in the husband's domain. So the Gemara says, Malkim Kari lekapti inish. People are not particular about the place of the legs of the bed since it's small. So therefore, since the bed is considered to be its own rishus, it's not considered to be within the domain of the husband. We saw in the Mishnah that the husband threw the get, l'teich cheiko, l'teich kalta, in her lap and her basket, to Nugaresh, she's divorced. Asked the Gemara, why is she divorced? Amai, mecher. The vessel of a buyer that are in the domain of the seller. It should be the case that the same is similar to a vessel of a buyer that are in the domain of the seller, with regard to which we know there's a machlekes. So, it's an example where the basket was hanging from her body, therefore it's not considered to be within her domain of the husband. Within the domain of the husband. Where the basket was hanging from her body. If it was tied to her, then it's enough, even if it's not hanging from her body. Where her basket was placed between her thighs, and therefore in the place where she is sitting, and since her husband is not particular about the place where she is sitting, is considered her domain. Where her husband was a basket seller, and therefore is not particular about the place where the basket is, since his whole courtyard is full of baskets, and is therefore considered to be in her domain. Since the place of her lap belongs to her, and the place of the basket belongs to her. My time what's the reason of because a person is not particular about the place of his wife's lap and not the place of her basket. And it's through, and it is as though you transfer ownership of the place to her for her use. If he threw the get in her lap or on her basket, or anything that's like her basket, she's divorced. Now, what does it mean? Anything that's like in her basket? Lasui might include what? Lasui taska to include the basket from which she eats dates. He's not particular about such a place. So the Mishnah, Amar Law, if he said to his wife, Kinsi shtar choiv zet, take this shtar choiv, and really it was a get. Or she found it behind him and he did not tell her what it was. But she reads what is written and she discovers that it was a get. So the Mishnah in a get is not considered a get. At Shemer Law, he has to say the words, this is your get. If he gave it to her in her hand and she was sleeping, and then he woke her. Again, he gave her the get in her hand and she was sleeping, and then he woke her, and she was reading what was written in it. And she finds it's a get. Any get, it's not a get. Until he says to her, this is your get. Now, the Mishnah's statement that if she found the get behind him is not a valid get until he says, this is your get. The Gemara says, even if he says, this is your get, what is it? Why is it considered to be a good get if it was not given to her in the proper manner? This is the case to take your get from where it's placed on the ground, which is not good. Now, and he explains, so the Gemara answers, it says, say that the get was not placed on the ground behind him, but rather she pulled it out from behind him. In other words, the get was tucked into his belt, and she pulled it out, and she received the get from him. So now the Gemara asks, if she pulled it out, it's also not considered a good get. It needs to be given into her hand, and it's not. After the Gemara, let's just have the Arak Lecharza, talking about a case where he bent his waist out towards her, Ushlafte as she pulled it out. And by extending his waist to her, as though he gave the get to her. Tainam Mahachi, we taught our Bryce as well, Omar Lo. If he said to his wife, Kinsi Shtar Chayv, take this Shtar Chayv, Ushlafte Machidav, or she pulled it out from behind him, Karate Vari Gito. In the Hawah, he said to his wife, take this Shtar Chayv, or she pulled it out from behind him, read it, and saw that it was a get. And he get it's not a get, until he says, this is your get. These are the words of Rebbe. Shimon says, actually, this is not a good get until he takes it from her and gives it to her again and says to her, this is your get. Raisa continues, the son of if he gave it to her in her hand and she was sleeping, and then he woke her, and when she reads it, what's written in it, and he gets out of after it's necessary to mention both machlekes. If was only talking about the first case, I would say, there Rebbe holds his shita because she is subject of being divorced, since she is awake and able to receive the get, even though he did not tell her that this is a get. But if you be able to have her sleeping, it's not subject to divorce. And I would say that he agrees to Shimon Lazar. If it was totally the case where she was sleeping, you could say that. But Shimon Lazar says, but in the other case, maybe he agrees to Rebbe. Amar says, if he wrote a get for her and he placed it in the hands of her slave when he is sleeping, and she's guarding him, how does it get? It's a good get. Neir, if her slave awoke, and a get is not a get, because this is like a case of a courtyard that is not secured by her, since he guards himself, he therefore does not require on her behalf. Yoshin Rava says, if he's sleeping and she's guarding him, or does it get that get? We know this is a walking courtyard, and a courtyard which is mobile does not acquire on behalf of the owner. If you're going to see that in the case of sleeping is different because he's currently now moving, whatever says, that if he would be moving, he would not acquire items. If he's standing and sitting, like is not pena. So our says that it's a case applies. The get is good only when the cuff was only when the slave is bound and sleeping. Since in that case, placing the get in his hand is like placing it in her hand. Next Mishnah, if the woman was standing in a Rishus Rabim and her husband took the get and threw it to her. So the Allah is like this: Karav la mugarashes. If it's closer to her, she's mugarashes. Karav la, if it's closer to him, and in mugarashes, she's not mugarashes. Mechza is half and half. Mugarashes, ben mugarashes. It's mugarashes, ben mugarashes. V'chilin kedusha. And so too in regards to the case of a chayiv. If the creditor said to him, throw the payment from my chayiv to me, he threw it to him. So Karav the malva, if he's closer to the malva, malva is zecha. So the Gemara, what does it mean? What's closer to her or closer to him? What's going on here? If it's 4 amas of her, so this is considered close to her. And his 4 amas karav lay. So what's the case of Mechza? Mechza Meshua Bar Yitzchak and Shneim and Ramas, both of them are standing within the same 4 Amos. And let us see which of them proceeded to the other, the 4 Amos, and those 4 Amos should be considered belong to that person. Also, then if you're going to say they came together, but isn't there a principle that's impossible to be precise? It is not possible that both events occurred exactly at the same time, and it's certain that one of them arrived before the other. We're talking about the case where precisely 8 Amos, where the 4 Amos are adjacent to the other 4 Amos. And the get extends from his 4 Amos to her 4 Amos, meaning that part of the get is in her 4 Amos and part of the get is in hers. Therefore, in this case, since it's uncertain whether she's divorced or not, divorced. So we're asking, but isn't the get still attached to him? Since part of it is within his 4 Amos, therefore he cannot be considered as he gave her the get. We're talking about there are 2 groups of witnesses. One says that the get fell closer to him. Therefore, the expression in the Mishnah is equally balanced, is referring not to distance but to opinions. Rabbi Yechlan says that we learned that closer to her means that even if it's 100 Amos, even 100 Amos. So what's according to Rabbi Yechlan? What's considered Mechza? Rabbi Yechlan says that this was explained to me personally by Rabbi Yechlan himself. If it's so positioned that he can guard it and she cannot guard it, this is considered closer to him. And if it's positioned that she can guard it and he cannot guard it, this is considered closer to her. And both cannot guard it, then this is considered Mechza. Okay, Omar. So the Chum said this explanation before. Rabbi Yechlan, the name of Rabbi Yechlan, and Rabbi Yechlan said this in amazement. Do our Babylonian friends know how to explain according to this explanation? Rabbi Yechlan was astonished that they also understood the issue as he did. Regards to any get that is closer to her than it's to him. And the dog came and took it before he reached her, and why is she not divorced? Once it was closer to her before the dog took it, the get should have taken effect. While she continued guarding the get to divorce even after the get took effect, rather closer to guard any get that is closer to her and to him, if the dog were to come and attempt to take it, and he would be able to guard it, and she would not be able to guard it, and Shina, wise guy. It's a nickname from Yehuda when they said, closer to her meaning that she could bend down and take it. You should not perform an action to perform the get to permit the divorcing woman to remarry. Until it comes to her hands. Mordechai said to Rashi, however, there was a Maisa, which the get was closer to the woman than the man, and it was lost. And after the husband died, they required the woman to chalitza. They did chalitza. They did not rely on the get that was given to the woman, since it never reached her hand. Mishnah said that v'chein le'inyan kiddushin. That our Rabbi Yissi, our Rabbi Yechlan, the Gittin Daf. They said this halacha is only in regards to Gittin, but not with regards to another matter. They asked the Shalom, they said the same thing halacha applies to a creditor. If a creditor said to the malva, to the leiva, throw the payment to me. So current the malva, if it's the malva zachal leiva, zakar the leiva chayv, mechsamech to shtein mechaykum. According to the halachas that are chayv compared to the halachas of the worst. The worst is nothing my skin. When it was the case, the amra lei zrekli chayv v'tipater. Where the malva said to the leiva, throw the payment from my debt to me, and you will be absolved from your obligation to pay this. So Yachim Amr, so what's the purpose of stating this? Since he made an explicit Tanai, it's obvious that the outcome will be in accordance with the Tanai. So they say that Amr is directly chayvi b'teres Gittin. He said, throw the payment to me according to the procedure of the divorce. Meaning that the halacha that applies to the divorce should apply here too. So where it says va'akati, but still, remember, what's the purpose of this? Since the Baal Chayv, since the Baal was made a Tanai, according to the procedure, in effect, where it says, you can say that, but he says, I'm just teasing you. We don't say that. Aruch says, get biyado mashichim yadi. The get was in her hand and a string tied to the divorce when in his hand. Now, if the husband can still pull the get out of her hand and bring it to him, in the Megodeshes, it's not Megodeshes. We love Megodeshes. My time, because we need creases, it has to have these creases, but it's not. If her hand was positioned like a slope, and he threw it to her, she gave the other, got to the other, even though it came to her, it wasn't it didn't rest. So I asked her to let her be divorced through the earspiece of the 4 Hammams. And if you don't say this, then Tisha Devei Reb Elazar, Abraham Shamri, Yishlaim Aver in that Bamber. No, Reb Elazar had the Shiloh, it requires that Tisha Devei Aver. So you can apply that they do not have earspiece. My skin is, and one says no. My skin, are dealing with the case of the standing of the river bank, and the mikar liibut koi, and the get stands to be destroyed from the outset. So in case everyone agrees that the earspiece of the 4 Hammams is not acquired to him.